The world's first air race was held in 1909, just 5.5 years after the Wright brothers gave birth to aviation. At Paris, France, 4 airplanes entered the 1909 race, 10 laps on a 1 2/10 kilometer oval course. None of them flew the full distance. The winner was a French Voisin biplane that flew the farthest, about halfway. The first major air show in the United States was the Los Angeles International Air Meet. In January 1910, 250,000 spectators turned out for the 10-day event. Prizes were offered for several firsts, including America's first air race. Glenn Curtiss won the prize for the fastest speed at 55 miles per hour. The Los Angeles Times called it one of the greatest public events in the history of the West. During the golden age of aviation, mid-1920s to the late 1930s, flying an airplane was often considered a daredevil sport, and air racing caught the public's imagination. In the years between the world wars, air racing was as popular as NASCAR is today. World War II brought major advances in aircraft and engines. When the war ended, military aircraft of every kind were declared surplus and offered for sale to private owners. These included high-performance fighters like the P-40 Warhawk, the P-38 Lightning, and the North American P-51 Mustang. The P-51 was a crucial long-range escort fighter for the U.S. and its allies in World War II, shielding bombers and destroying enemy aircraft. The fabled Mustang was one of the fastest propeller-driven airplanes of the war. When the government offered P-51s and other fighters for sale, their potential as air racers was obvious. As race planes became more expensive to buy and maintain, the number of racers diminished, and so did the crowds. After the Cleveland National Air Races ended in 1949, air racing nearly died as a sport. In 1964, Bill Stead, a cattle rancher and world champion hydroplane driver, sought to resurrect the national air races in the high desert near Reno, Nevada. Racing planes with speeds over 500 miles per hour brought renewed interest from pilots and fans. Race plane classes were reshuffled and new classes created to add to the excitement. At the beginning, modified warbirds, production aircraft, and custom-built racers in a range of classes met at Reno to race around the pylons. The historic airplanes before you each hold a significant place in racing history and have unique stories to tell. Today, air racing is moving forward, accepting the challenges of relocating to Roswell, New Mexico. There will always be those intrepid souls to whom the airplanes, the pylons, and the checkered flag offer an irresistible challenge.
And there he is. Almost all your sights around there shows R.A. Bob, as he likes to be known, and Mr. Bob Hoover, Mr. Mustang. All race aircraft final power application taking place at the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Gentlemen, you have a race. They're right together going down the back. It looks like he might take him. He's coming around, moving pretty quickly on the outside. They're coming into this last pylon right now. Down low, gets that wing up in a hurry. But they're coming around together. Down the finish line. Here they go.
Ladies and gentlemen, as they come out, I'll introduce them as they come out. This is Warren Pietsch. Warren and his wife, Jolene, own this Thunderbird. Let's not leave Jolene out. Warren, if you want to go ahead and take your seat right here, I'll take this first one.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Take the next one. And ladies and gentlemen, it is truly an honor for me to welcome Clay Lacy to our stage here. Just here, yeah, on the end. And his friend Emma, who takes such great care of Clay. Clay Lacy was... he raced in the very first Reno air race, so it is truly an honor to have Clay with us. And the rest of our cast here, Miss Vicky Benzing, she now owns Plum Crazy. Take your seat next to Clay will be great. And here we have the last winner of the last Reno race. This would be Steve Hinton, Jr. Steve-O, is that what we call you?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. In the middle there, please. He gets the hot seat right in the middle. And Justin Zabel, the owner of the Bardahl Special.
Thank you.
And welcome to all of you, and it is a pleasure to see such a huge crowd, but why not? This is quite the subject to discuss here. And this airplane, Plum Crazy, this was Clay's airplane. It came to Vicky a few years ago, and she has championed it with grace and talent that we're very pleased to see it still flying. And as I said, Steve-O here in the middle, he's going to tell us a little bit what it's like to go around those pylons at the speed he does. And Justin Zabel, we had on the videos that you saw, the Bardahl Special was supposed to be here. They went to great effort to make that happen, but airplanes sometimes do not cooperate. So it's still in California, I believe. So they'll tell us a little bit about their mission to get it here and what happened with that. And then we come to Warren with this Thunderbird. This was a cross-country racer, and we're speaking to Reno mostly. But before Reno, these airplanes were developed to highlight aviation other than as war machines. So Warren's going to tell us a little bit about that. So that's going to be the little bit of our run of show. And I'd like to start with Clay, as seniority and respect would dictate. And Clay, I would like for you to tell the people, how did you get into racing? Was there a story about you flying for United and kind of running into somebody and you said, hey, I think that sounds like a good idea?
Well, I was in Reno on a layover with the airline in January of '64, and it was a snowy day. And anyway, walked by the Chamber of Commerce and saw they were going to race, and I thought I'd like to do that. So we got a P-51 and got into it. It was a great time. What else?
Well, I think you did not own the P-51 at the time, but it belonged to someone else, but that's the airplane that you later purchased and continued to fly it in the Reno. What was your first win at Reno? You raced the first time in 1964.
Right.
But then you won?
In 1970.
1970. Do you recall your speed, or what was the speed accomplished in 1964? I believe it was about 360 miles an hour?
Yeah, I think when I won, I was only 390 or so. But it was great fun.
Great fun. A lot of fun, a lot of great people. I read the name Myra Slovak. He was actually from, what became the Czech Republic, but there were a lot of names there. Was Bob Hoover involved at the very beginning?
Yes, he was. He was a lead airplane, yeah.
He was the lead airplane. So as early...
Starter.
Yeah, the starter. So I think the phrase, gentlemen, you have a race, Bob Hoover made famous, but then there are people like you who brought the sport and the racing forward to where it was today. And we have Mr. Fred Telling here, who is assuring that we have a new location for what was the Reno Air Races. So they're going to Roswell. So a little later on, Fred Telling is going to relate to us what they're doing to make it continue on. Is there anything in particular you would like for the audience here to know about the early days of racing?
No, it was great fun, and people were interested in World War II airplanes, like a P-51, and it hit off right at the beginning.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to Vicky, who's sitting next to you, and tell us a little bit about your friendship with Clay and how you came to own this beautiful airplane behind us.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd been flying for about 35 years or so, and done all kinds of different flying, aerobatics, backcountry flying, but never got a chance to fly a Warbird, so I thought that was something that I needed to make happen for myself. So I went out to Stallion 51 and got typed. And I promised my husband I'd never buy a Mustang. In fact, for Christmas, he gave me this little toy Mustang and said, "This is the only Mustang you'll ever have." And then Clay's my neighbor at Pine Mountain Lake, and I'd known him for quite a long time. And I heard that his airplane came for sale, and it took me probably a year to convince my husband really that this was the right thing to do. But I knew it was my airplane because it had Snoopy on the tail, and I'm a big fan of Snoopy, and it's purple, and my extra was purple, so purple was kind of my color at that time, and so we worked out a deal, and I bought this airplane in 2019, and I brought it out to Reno as a static display in 2019, and then flew it down to Chino, and Steven here took care of it for 4 years, and we got it done in time to race it in 23, and that's kind of my story of the airplane.
Okay, well, you mentioned this is your color, but it was that color before you bought it. So how did it come to be this color? It's a little unusual.
Right. So when Al Paulson acquired the airplane, which Clay didn't say, but he traded a Cessna 310 plus $10,000 for the Mustang. And the Mustang was in yellow colors at the time. And they were talking about, well, what color should we paint it? And at the same time, Al Paulson was repossessing these Lockheed Constellations, and he was going to set up this airline from Van Nuys to Hawaii and call it Orchid Airlines. And his wife said, well, if you're going to run this airline, Orchid Airlines, we should paint a purple stripe on the side. So they ordered 50 gallons of purple of custom orchid-colored paint, and they got shipped 1,500 gallons of paint. So the ladders, the toolboxes, the tugs, and the Mustang all got painted purple. And it became this iconic purple airplane that, in fact, when we raced it in 23, I had so many people come up to me and say, oh, this was my favorite airplane as a little kid because, it's purple, it stood out. And one of the guys that ran around in the crowd with Clay at the time worked for Fred Smith of FedEx and was designing the logo for the FedEx. And they saw how popular the purple was, so they ended up incorporating the purple into the FedEx logo.
Yeah, but
It's kind of a cool story.
It is. That is kind of a cool story. So, way back, at the beginning of FedEx, Fred Smith was a friend of my late husband's, and then me. We were in Little Rock, which is where FedEx started, and these people who came up with this concept and gave it to Fred. So Fred comes in the bar this night in Little Rock, and he said, "We're going to paint the airplanes. I want you to look at this, see what you think. I think we'll paint them purple and red." Mm-hmm. We said, "You've lost your mind." Mm-hmm. And very quickly on that, we lost Fred Smith a month or so ago. He passed away. He did a phenomenal... he made a gift to all of us in the overnight delivery, changed the way we do things. So remembering Fred here is an appropriate thing to do. He was a great man. Steve-O, so you won Reno in 2023. Tell us, yes, congratulations.
And how many other times?
And how many other times, But that one was significant. The difference in the speed from 1964 to 2023 was about how much?
120 miles an hour or so.
Yeah, that's all. Okay.
That's it.
So tell us a little bit, what do you do to an airplane to make it 120 miles an hour faster?
It's quite a bit of work, and Justin here next to me tasked us, I believe it was in March of 2023. He said, what would it take to make the airplane win the gold race? And at the time, we had several other aircraft which were capable of 450 or 460 miles an hour. So taking a stock Mustang and trying to reliably go 470 or faster required the complete disassembly of the aircraft. The stock Merlin behind us in both these aircraft puts out around 1,500 horsepower, and the racing version of that Merlin puts out around 3,400 horsepower. So everything is built around that engine. The way we get that horsepower out of the engine is we use late dash model Rolls-Royce parts. The Merlin was built into the 1960s, so we use what are considered transport Merlin parts. The metallurgy was better. It's a stronger engine. We removed the boost control, which limits the amount of manifold pressure you can attain. We removed the aftercooler, which is cooling the charge of air and fuel out of the supercharger before the combustion chambers. We put a straight tube in there. The reason for that is the aftercooler restricts airflow. You could break the aftercooler fins when you're running boost over 120 inches of manifold pressure. So we put a tube in there. When you do that, you have to cool the charge by using anti-detonation injection fluid, ADI, which is a mix of methanol and water. So the aircraft gets quite complex with systems just to support the Merlin engine. On top of that, we do a lot of drag reduction. So the radiator scoop that you see behind us is a stock scoop. The inlet for Bardahl and the other race Mustangs is approximately half that size. We have to supplement that with cooling water, spray bar water, which flows about 5 gallons a minute. And the modifications go on and on from there. So the scoop is drag reduction. We remove the wing tips off the aircraft. I think there's a lot of false rumors that people take hacksaws to these airplanes to make racers, and that's not the case at all, I assure you. The aircraft are disassembled so that they can go back to stock. No parts are cut up in the process, but the wings are clipped 3 feet off of each side. The propeller is different. The rudder is different. Everything in between is different. So that summer, we had approximately 8 of us working on Bardahl, and all of the wing came apart. We built new fuel tanks. It's really a process, and I think the staggering thing is that the engine's consuming approximately 4 gallons a minute of fuel, about 4 gallons of methanol a minute, and the radiator's spraying 5 gallons a minute. So every minute there's 13 gallons of fluid going across the airplane somewhere.
Okay, so that brings us to reference Warren's airplane behind me. The mission for an engine to run at Reno is a short time because you can't carry all those fluids, obviously. What Warren's airplane did in setting cross-country records is quite different, so we'll have Warren tell us about that in a few minutes. But Justin, what prompts someone like you to make the commitment to have an airplane like this race at Reno, but then beyond that, you and I spoke back in February about you coming here, and I have to applaud Justin and all of the other owners who participate with their airplanes at Warbirds in Review. A phone call, a conversation, and they step up and say, sure, I'll do that. Well, there's a lot that goes into, sure, I'll do that. So why? What makes you do that?
Well, competition, I guess.
And thank you for, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, going back to the race part of it, I think, so we campaigned the airplane in 22 stock, and I think we qualified around 320 miles an hour or so. And after the race was over, and, they got a lot of these social media posts where you got these airplane teams talking about the next year. I don't want to call out the other race team, but you see these little posts, well, we're going to be the fastest airplane next year. We're doing all these secret things, but we can't tell you about them just yet. Well, no, we'll tell you later. And I called Steve one night, and I said, I'm kind of tired of seeing these, when they post these things, and when they show up, they never perform. Like, they don't get in front, they're not first or whatever, And I said, what's it going to take? First we started, I said, what's this going to take to get around that airplane? Stealth, like we'll just do it, not tell anybody that we're modifying the plane, and then show up at Reno and get past them. That was the first goal. And then he says, well, let me think about it. And then 3 or 4 days later, he called me and says, I think you're looking at this wrong. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, if you're going to go all the way, why don't you just go for the gold? Like, why just one plane? I said, okay, well, I guess that was the start of our transition, and he came with a whole list of stuff that we needed to do to mod the airplane, and it was quite extensive, and they did quite a bit of work in about 4 months' time. But, we qualified, I think, at 470, so it was substantially faster than the year before. But, yeah, mostly what the driver was that. And then also with the history, it was the first airplane to cross the finish line in 1964 at the first races. It technically didn't win first because it was a point system, and I think the race before they'd cut a pylon, so they were down in points, but they had to maintain first place in order to be in second by points. So it was the fastest airplane, the first one across the finish line, and we had a couple goals. One was we wanted the airplane to be the last Reno races, also that same plane to be the first airplane across the finish line, which we did. And also, it was a goal of ours, and then props to Bob Button, who's letting us use these engines. We wanted Steve-O. He was tied for the winningest pilot in Reno with, I think, Daryl Greenemeyer and Tiger, and himself was 7, right? And so we wanted him, to get an 8th win to have left Reno with, the winningest pilot, which we accomplished that as well. So, that was pretty much basic.
Well, I applaud both of you, and Steve-O had almost a legacy in his father, Steve Hinton Sr., that we all admire and respect greatly as a person and as a pilot. He has to be very proud of you coming along behind him and not just walking in his steps, but stepping outside of them and moving forward. So we're happy to have a younger person involved in the aviation world, not only as a pilot, but as somebody who really understands what it takes to make an airplane go. And I'll go back to Vicky for a moment. Your airplane is basically stock.
It's stock, yeah.
And you still, you qualified at Reno at a very respectable speed. What was that?
I'm sorry. I think it was around 357. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Something like that. So that was pretty much what they did. The winningest plane did at the beginning, right? And
Right.
but we tried to make it as fast as possible. It's a stock engine, but we removed all the antennas. We put the antennas we have one out right now for cross country flying, but we put the comm antennas in the wingtips. We had special wingtips built so that we could accommodate the antennas. We put spray bars in it so that we could keep the coolant door closed. And they profiled the wings when they stripped the paint off. They profiled them so the wings are smooth. There's obviously no guns, right? Gun ports. So everything and I raced in sport class for, 13 years. So everything you do to make the fuselage faster pays benefits over the course of the lifetime of the airplane, because now you go faster on your cross countries, save fuel, and so it all pays off. So I was all in for making any airframe mods that would make it faster. Did I forget anything we did?
No, I think you covered all the bases there. Yeah.
But it's nice flying a stock engine. You should ask Steve-O how hard it is to fly something where you're having to add in ADI and water and all the things.
Where do you get those extra hands that do all those things? You
Especially
don't have
on the
starts.
Yeah, it gets real busy with the, like I said, the water injection, the methanol, the spray bar. So in Bardahl in particular, there's a valve right on the center of the instrument panel which controls manual flow of ADI. And that's really limiting your induction temperature. If you have an induction temperature over 100 degrees, at anything north of 80 inches, it'll detonate the engine. So that's a primary gauge. Then we also have, on the left-hand side of the seat, down on the floor, a spray bar valve to regulate the flow of water across the radiator. And the way that radiator was set up, we had two systems. There was a secondary valve behind the seat. There's a gate valve. So you get real busy in the cockpit trying to monitor all these things and adjust the flows. There's no, in this particular aircraft, there was no telemetry going back to the ground crew. So the only set of eyes were mine in the cockpit. And when you build up the power, when we joined up next to the Pace jet, you might be at 36 or 40 inches of manifold pressure at 2,300 RPM. But then as you slowly build up to start coming down the start chute, you have to get the power from cruise power up to 120 inches or north of that at 3,400 RPM. So those are all step increments with a correlating adjustment of these valves. So your left hand is quite busy while you're trying to fly a formation and monitor the instrumentation. And then, of course, when you get down on the race course itself, you're trying to pick out pylons when you're about 80 feet off the desert floor. So it gets to be a rush. You're traveling around 750 feet per second, and there's a lot going on. But initially, the first time I raced, everything happened real fast. I couldn't even remember if I actually called for the clock to qualify. Of course, now by the end of it, doing it for so many years, everything slows down, and you can really notice all the details.
It's like anything. Once you know what you're doing, it becomes a little more, hey, there's nothing to this, right?
Yeah.
Right. How many Gs do you pull going around a pylon?
We're pulling up to 6 Gs going around the race course at those speeds. The biggest pull is at the start of the race when you have a lot of energy and trying to make the first turn and get ahead of the rest of the pack. But ultimately, the goal is to fly at the least amount of G, because the more G you put onto an aircraft, the slower it gets. So at times 6, but then generally 3 to 4 Gs for the remainder of the race.
So we can talk about modifying the airplanes. We can talk about all these other things we do to go fast. But a good, smooth pilot is essential. And that would be this man right here, sitting in the middle here. And I think you all know that. And so, Justin, anything you'd like to add about the preparation for getting here? What did you have to do to the airplane, or what was your commitment to get it to Oshkosh versus racing it?
Well, I might let Steve touch on that. I'll back up a little bit on the power in the airplane. I think when we qualified, you were running 120 inches or so, and we were prepared to race. If we had a race, going up to about 140 inches, I think, power. So it's pretty substantial. And, it's interesting perspective. A couple, 3 months after the race, I was flying business back east, and we're at 45,000 feet. We got that little screen that tells us, how fast we're going. And I was at 471 miles an hour, and I was looking up working at 471. So I took a picture of it, and I texted it down to Steve. I said, hey, I just beat your qualifying speed by a mile an hour. And I said, but it's not as fun as flying 50 feet above the ground. He's always quick-wit. He texts me back, says, well, my Wi-Fi isn't as good as down there. But it's an interesting perspective, though, when you think about what they're doing with these airplanes. They're flying around in a circle, 50 feet, going 470, and I'm in a modern-day Citation jet at 45,000 feet, going 471. It's just amazing what they've done to these airplanes and how fast they can make these piston-powered engines go. It's hot, higher elevation, pretty much in a bank of, a 3G level turn all the way around, doing 470 or more if we were racing, So it's pretty remarkable what some of these guys have done with the technology of these engines and got them for racing.
Well, and to that point, we have an owner who made the commitment to keep them going and to improve them. We have the flyer, who in this case happens to be a very good maintenance background, but the people who maintain the airplanes and research and keep them going, and I know our good friend Jack Roush is watching from inside. The people like Jack, and there are a few of them out there, but it's a very limited number of people who have the resources and the commitment from the mechanical side and the development side of making the parts that keep these airplanes going. So I shout out to all of the people who make those parts to keep them going, because the parts are pretty old, from World War II, but they continue to improve them, develop them. So it's very good. Just for a reference for the people, you talk of 120 inches, 140 inches. Normal takeoff on the Mustang is 61 inches. So that's quite a bit different. And most of the airplanes you see here, because they want to take care of those engines, guys don't use that full 61 inches now, but that's a huge, huge difference in what the stock airplane does. So Warren, I've left you sitting here, so let's go back a little to just after World War II. These airplanes were surplus. They were sold by the U.S. military. I think they sold a lot of them in 1957, I think, after they served in the Guard or whatever. But prior to that, tell us a little bit about after World War II, or even before, the air racing and the cross country, the Bendix in particular, if you want to start with that, Warren.
Yeah. Thank you, Connie. I think the Bendix Air Race was initially started by the Cleveland Air Race founders in conjunction with Bendix Corporation, Mr. Bendix, to demonstrate the reliability and the speed of airplanes, to trying to promote aviation, to be able to get to the point we're at today, where you can cross this country or go around the world in a short amount of time. And so the Bendix started in the early 30s and was initially a race of speed, but they had to stop for fuel between Rosamond Dry Lake Bed, which is now Edwards Air Force Base, and Cleveland, Ohio. And they continually improved on the reliability and the speeds of the airplane. Obviously, during World War II, unfortunately, I guess, war creates a demand for technology, and the technology was progressed forward immensely during those 5 years. And these airplanes came out, and they were a choice of the Bendix Air Race when they restarted to show that cross-country ability, because they'd been doing it during the war, ferrying the airplanes, flying missions to Central Germany, Japan, and they were very experienced at cross-country flying, and the airplanes were pretty fast at the time. Joe DiBona was a cross-country or a ferry pilot in World War II. He was a veteran of World War II, and he was a ferry pilot, so he was pretty familiar with it, and his dream was to win a Bendix Air Race. So he entered the Bendix Air Races and got assigned race number 90 in 1947. And he raced a D model Mustang, just like Vicky's and Clay's here, that was called Magic Town. And Magic Town was a Jimmy Stewart movie. The next year, well, he got it second that year. The next year, he wanted to beat the guy who had beat him in 47, who was Paul Mance. And Paul Mance had a Razorback Mustang that was modified for cross-country racing with a wet wing, they called it, approximately 860 gallons of gas in the wing, plus the tank in the back seat. And So he and Jimmy Stewart funded the Joe DiBona race team so they could keep the number 90, and Joe DiBona had the expertise. Obviously, Jimmy Stewart was a great World War II veteran, also 24 missions in B-24s over Europe. Ended up with a long, illustrious military career in addition to his acting career. So they had the Joe DiBona race team, which was Jimmy Stewart owned it, but Joe DiBona was flying the airplane. And in 1948, he took this airplane and left Rosamond Dry Lake Bed and ran. He was in the lead, going to win the race, and he landed 61 miles short at Norwalk, Ohio, out of gas. So the next year, they made up their mind they were going to do something about this being out of gas thing, and so they put, I think it was 48 coats of lacquer on the airplane to get it smooth, and they did everything they could to smooth the airplane up. And in addition to that, they actually put dry ice in the fuel so they could get more fuel in the gas tanks because that cooled the fuel down and stuff. I mean, they were doing all these things to win the race. And he ended up winning. It's the last piston-powered airplane to win a Bendix Air Race in 1949. It still holds the piston-powered record of 470 miles an hour for Rosamond Dry Lake Bed, Cleveland, 4 hours and 16 minutes. But to back up a little bit to Jimmy Stewart, I've done some research over the years, and I acquired this airplane in 1999 as a project, and a couple of years after that I found out what airplane it was, and so made up my mind that it needed to be painted exactly the way it crossed the finish line in 1949, and that's the way it is right now. It's exactly how it crossed the finish line. Jimmy Stewart was a pilot before World War II. He built model airplanes. He followed Lindbergh's flight across the ocean in his father's hardware store window. He was an aviation nut. And when he went to war, he was a very successful veteran, I guess. But I read a book called Mission. It's one of the books about Jimmy Stewart. And in that book, when he was a wing commander, he made a statement to an aide who was quoted in this book. And the statement was, I don't think I'll ever fly again after the war. I'm tired of seeing innocent people killed with airplanes, and I'm tired of sending my guys off to battle to die in battle in airplanes. And so he had this association in his mind of what airplanes had become as a representation to probably most of the people in the world. And when he came back from the war, and now I'm going to transition to the Anvil, because the Anvil, the 1853 Anvil, is probably the most asked question I've had about this airplane since we finished it in 23. And I have two theories. None of it's in print. None of it can be proven, but I have two theories on it. And one of them came from one of the people at Air Corps who helped finish this airplane. The first theory I have is his grandfather started their family business, the hardware store, in 1853. And the Anvil at the time was the blacksmith sign, and I think it was synonymous with a hardware store, and I think that Jimmy was paying homage to his family, his grandfather's business with that Anvil of 1853. The more romantic side of that deal is that Verdi wrote an opera in 1853, an Italian opera, that had the 1853 Anvil chorus in it. And that chorus, to paraphrase the lyrics in it, basically talk about a gypsy group who were beating their hammers on anvils, and the lyrics say something to the effect of, "Gypsy maiden, take off your dark clothes, it's time to stop mourning, and put on a brightly colored dress and celebrate." Glenn Miller remade that song as a swing tune, during the war, and Glenn Miller obviously died during the war in an unfortunate accident. I believe Glenn Miller and Jimmy Stewart were probably friends, because Jimmy Stewart made the Glenn Miller story after the war in a movie. I think Jimmy Stewart wanted to come home from the war and show the world that these airplanes could be used for something besides war. He wanted to show the dependability and the speed that was available in these airplanes, and he painted the airplane in a brightly colored dress and set a record for the Bendix and trying to show people that they were good for something else. And I think the innovation and the development that came from the World War II fighter plane to the current Bardahl airplane is amazing, and the P-51 is the backbone of that development. It's been the backbone of air racing and development of air transport for all these years. I mean, it was a great steed in World War II, and it continues to be. It's a wonderful history. It's a wonderful airplane, and this airplane tells 3 great stories, and the third one is Jacqueline Cochran. And so we've heard about Joe DiBona wanting to win the Bendix, and he was a real estate agent after the war, but he was a ferry pilot, so he was a common man that had a dream, and he achieved the dream. Jacqueline Cochran bought the airplane from Jimmy Stewart, where he sold it to her for $1 in OVC, other valuable considerations. She had it for 3 years. She set 3 records in it that still stand to this day. And when Jacqueline Cochran passed, I believe she held more aviation records than any other aviator in the world. Women were equal in 1949, 1950. Jimmy Stewart was a great veteran from World War II, and he was a Hollywood actor at the same time, and he was a conservative. Hollywood was conservative in 1949. I don't know what we've been fighting for ever since. I mean, it's like I'm confused about the whole thing, because this airplane represents all these great stories and successes, and I like having it out there to tell those stories. I think they're important. And when this is all over, you can read the storyboards over there and see some of that stuff. But that's it. That's what I got.
Well, great stories, Warren. And to the anvil, I don't believe Scott had a picture of that anvil. It is on the side of the airplane. Scott's probably scrambling in here in the production room going, oh, man, I need a picture of the anvil. So it is on the side of the airplane. Great story. Could mean several things, and it probably did to Jimmy Stewart. And same thing with the bright color of the airplane. It is absolutely gorgeous. And to Vicky's airplane, Clay's former airplane, they tell the story and they catch your eye, and they promote aviation and the dream that people may have of being involved in aviation. And Jackie Cochran, she could not be in the military per se in World War II, but she was a WASP and did a lot. And I have met several of the WASP, the ladies who flew during World War II as ferry pilots or towing targets, which was not a real safe thing to do. But they served in any way that they could, and they enjoyed flying airplanes just like anybody else. So I appreciate the WASP and all that Jackie Cochran and the other ladies did before me that allowed me at this time when I came along to fly airplanes. And same with Vicky. We had a little bit of a conversation. To any young boy, any young girl out there, it doesn't matter. Follow your dream, whatever your dream is. And speaking of that, I think this man right here, as 10 years old, he had a dream. Tell us about what color your bedroom was when you were 10 years old.
In 1968, I went to Rockford, Illinois, to the first time I'd been to the EAA fly-in. My dad had a Starduster 2 that he'd just built, and we went down there as a family. We followed a Mooney. Anyway, I saw Mustangs for the first time. I saw Bob Hoover fly, and there was about a half a dozen Mustangs sitting there. I think 5 of them were in civilian colors, and one of them had stars and bars on it. And I went home, and I painted my bedroom wall blue, and I went to the school. I got an opaque projector, and I projected a picture of a P-51 on the wall that was 10 feet long, and I painted a picture of a Mustang on my wall. And I'd sit and look at that thing sometimes at night when I was going to sleep and dream about having a Mustang. And sometimes it felt like the dream was going to come true, and sometimes it didn't feel like it was going to come true. It was kind of back and forth. But, I've been flying. Mr. Ames is sitting over there. Henry Reichert allowed me to fly his Mustang. I've flown other people's airplanes, and I've enjoyed the heck out of it for the last 30 years, and it's been amazing. But there's also something to be said about walking in a hangar and looking at it and going, that was mine.
That one's mine. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Dream big.
Yeah.
Dream big.
Dream big.
And same thing with you, Justin. I'm sorry, Warren, go ahead. You had something else to say.
One of the other things I was going to talk about is the airplane still holds 5 speed records. The 3 that Jacqueline set in the airplane, the Bendix record, and then the transcontinental speed record for piston-powered airplanes from L.A. to New York. And then it hauled the Queen Elizabeth II coronation films for CBS on the day she was coronated. So it does have a lot of history. And just last week, Kevin Grantham is an aviation historian, and he sent me some original tickets from the 1949 Cleveland races that are actually printed on foil. They're like stamped out license plates that they made the tickets out of, and they're in a frame over there. But one of the things at the National Air and Space Museum in June, we were there, and were able to get in contact with a guy by the name of Lee Smith, who's 100 years old, and he was involved in that transcontinental prep for the airplane, and some amazing numbers for the day. Nothing compared to Justin and Steve here, but in 1954, when it set the record, they prepped the airplane with 860 gallons of gas, 40 gallons of oil, and they had an average speed across the country of 560 miles an hour, LA to New York, when they left. Mobil brewed a special gas for them at the time, 160 octane. They had to pay the truck driver an extra $15 to transport it to LAX because it was so volatile. This is what this guy was saying. And he said, so they had all this fuel and oil in there, and then they ran 85 inches for 4.5 hours all the way across the country, which is probably why the pictures at the other end of the races, there's oil dripping off the trailing edge of the rudder. And I think they blew an engine up every time they raced it. But and when we got the project, the logbooks, they only showed like 154 hours total time on the airplane. It was built after the war as a racer. It was never a warbird. It never had a gun in it, but it was built from parts after the war and assigned a special end number. So it has always been a racer based on the P-51 design. So anyway.
Well, and quite the history, as does Clay's airplane here. And we're running out of time here. But speaking of history, I want to say again that we are honored to have a gentleman here who was at the very first Reno air race. And Clay, we thank you, and we remember Bob Hoover with Gentlemen You Have a Race. I'm sure there are a lot of good stories at Reno, and it was a lot of fun. Smoke oil parties. Paul Poberezny used to go out there all the time. So there are a lot of really good backstories there as well. But we can thank Fred Telling for his efforts. Fred, would you like to say a word or two about the Reno? They aren't Reno air races, they're air races. So they have evolved over the years, so you're going to keep it going.
Well, we're doing our best. Connie, thank you very much. And as you say, the history of EAA and air racing is closely tied to each other, because when you get right down to it, as Paul said early on, we all come for the airplanes, we come back for the people. And in reality, we're looking forward to the September family coming back together again. I'm humbled to be in this extraordinary group, because not only do you have the winningest racer here, you have the first racer from '64, you got Vicky with all of her sport experience and then moved on to Unlimiteds, and the Transcontinental Thunderbird's fabulous. But just like Jack Roush, I have to recognize Justin, because the simple fact of the matter is these birds are extraordinarily valuable these days. It's getting harder and harder for everybody to put the kind of investment it takes in to race them. And so Justin has been an extraordinary supporter. So let me just say to the crowd, September 10th through 14th, bring your RV, because while Roswell was the absolute safest place for us to race, and we worked it out with all the classes, the reality is we always knew it ain't Reno. The high end of the food chain for hotels is Hampton by Marriott, and Hampton rather by Hilton. And the reality is there are still some space available, but RVs are plentiful. We've got 400 spaces. We're looking forward to reconstituting the races. I won't be around 40, 50 years from now, but my commitment as a former T6 racer is I'm investing all my time and energy to make this exist long into the future. So I'm now, as Connie knows, a Roswell resident. I'll be there for the next 3-4 years to make certain that these races live on into the future. It's an iconic event which brings out the best in competition in America. So if you want to see the best of the best and all the classes that exist, we're delighted to see you there. So thank you very much, Connie. Thanks for organizing this event. It's been fantastic. And if you run the trailer today, you'll see Bob Hoover is part of it saying, gentlemen, you have a race from the original 64 tape. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. And there is a little backdrop. We have the sound of a Mustang that we had them taxi in just for them.
What do you love the most about air races?
Camaraderie. Everybody is friends. Everybody helps each other. And we're all very professional and have a great time.
Some say we're crazy. I'd put it more, we have a deep affliction and a commitment to the skills and the practice of aviation. We love it.
Came for the airplanes and the races, but we keep coming back for the family.
The Section 3 people were just all over me, wanting me to autograph every part of their body, and it was great. I love Section 3.
If you like P-51s, if you like warbirds, you like jets, you just like tinkering with airplanes, this is the place.
What's the best part about the air races?
Everything. It's the people that makes it unique.
Whole lot of love.
Whole lot of love.
Whole lot of love.
Whole lot of love.
Control, Sport Gold takes about 3 minutes from the start.
Sport Gold flight bridge control, cleared onto the course.
Copy, cleared on the course.
230 at 17 gust 27, break.
Nice job, guys. Everybody lining it up. Looking perfect. Everybody hold what you got.
Bar none, this is the fastest motorsport in the world.
Race plane to race aircraft. Gentlemen, you're looking good. Gentlemen, you have a race.
And it looks like it might be Wee Willie that will be Robbie Patterson, followed by Sweet and Lucky.
That was fun.
Okay, we'll see you in Roswell, Fred. And to wrap it up, let me say thank you to all of our panel here. And Vicky, we'll see you flying later this week?
Yep.
When? What days?
Well, today, tomorrow, Friday, and Sunday.
Yeah, other than that, she's not doing anything. And Steve-O, thank you for being here. Justin, I know that you went to great efforts to have your airplane here. It's been really fun to go back and forth with Justin and the history that he and his son have put together on the Bardahl Special. And we could go on for a very, very long time. Warren, I've known you for a very, very long time. I've always admired you as a person and for what you've done for aviation and for all the people, the Dakota Air Museum and the other people. You're right, we're very fortunate when other people let us fly their airplanes, but to look in the hangar and say, that's mine. That's got to be really special. We have a couple of minutes maybe for questions from the audience if we have one. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I was going to ask if Bardahl will be racing at Roswell this year, but after your history lesson, I'm going to change my question and ask, is Bardahl going to be crossing the finish line first at Roswell this year?
I don't know. Hard to say. To be determined, I guess. Yeah. We're not sure yet.
You're not sure if it'll race or if it'll finish first?
We've got some mechanical issues that we're fighting, which is why it's not here from California. And that's just the nature of air racing, whether you're trying to race in a circle or come cross country with it. The airplane is still highly modified with a lot of systems, and we've got some engine issues with the nose case back home. So we're just trying to work through those as diligently as we can.
Well, I have every confidence in the world. If there's any way it'll be there, it will be there. And good luck to you. Yes, sir.
Quick question for Steve-O. First of all, thank you so much for your talents and your ability to talk about the modifications for the P-51. Great job with all of that. The question was, is there anything that... Was there any consideration for flying without the tips cross-country? The wingtips, without the wingtips on for the cross-country flight?
Oh, to come here this week? Yeah, the plan was to have the aircraft here as it raced without having a race engine in it, have a stock engine is what we have. It's not a stock engine that would go in either one of these P-51s, but for the racing aircraft, it's a stock engine. So the plan was to have it here with all the modifications on it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I don't know. We have had, in this age of technology, some options for a social media question, but I'm not sure if my social media person has one of those questions. But while we're looking for that, I would like to ask our veterans who are in the audience here, could you please stand, and we thank you for your service. Thank you. You're the reason that we're able to stand here and present these programs and keep these airplanes going. So thanks to all who serve, including the volunteers who make all this happen here, but especially to our military. Here's my social media question.
Yeah, this one's for Steve. After so much success at Reno, what are your plans for Roswell?
The goal is to never lose.
It's pretty simple. So we have one more over here. Yes, sir.
Hi. So I have two questions.
Oh no, you're only allowed one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So we got some history about Thunderbird. What about a little summary of the history of the particular airframes of Bardahl and Plum Crazy? And then another question would be for Steve of. The Mustang has a tendency to overheat on the ground, infamously. Is that exasperated at all with your racing airframe of Bardahl?
Okay, I'll start with Plum Crazy's history. It was built near the end of the war, so it never left the U.S., never saw action. After the war, it went up to Canada and served in the RCAF. Till it was up in Vancouver, Sea Island, Canada. And then it came back to the U.S. in 1959 and was brokered around. As far as I could tell, it really wasn't flown a whole lot until Al Paulson acquired it, and then later Clay Lacy. So Clay owned the airplane for, I think, 55 years before I purchased it. So almost a one-owner airplane. Yeah.
I thought I saw it.
For Bardahl, if you go, my son has a webpage, Lost Coast Warbirds, and there's a whole section on the history of the airplane. It's quite extensive, even in its racing history. It could go on for probably an hour or two talking about it. But if you want to look that up, there's a pretty extensive history on its race history and its prior life as well. Yeah.
You know, I will say for Plum Crazy, not only did Clay race it from 64 to 72, but he also raced in a number of transcontinental air races. And he tells once, well, there's a couple of good stories, you would guess from doing those kind of races, but one of the stories was he was up high going fast, and the controller called him and said, I have you clocked at 5:05 across the ground. What kind of airplane is that? And he said, oh, it's a P-51. And he said, is that a piston airplane? Yep. That's the fastest I've ever seen a piston airplane go. So he raced in quite a number and won quite a number of continental air races across the country.
Well, I'll say that which I knew would happen, we've used up our hour, and I hope that we have covered air racing to the point, and the civilian carry on to maintain these airplanes as these gentlemen who have given of their time and their airplanes would, and this lady have been happy with the stories they've been able to tell. So I'll go to Clay. Clay, would you have any closing comments to our audience that you would like to share?
I didn't get
Would you like to share a quick note to the audience? A little inspiration from the legend that we have sitting here, maybe. Yeah.
Well, air racing was great fun, and thanks to many people and to Reno for getting it going again in 1964. And I'm very pleased that I got involved enough to understand what people thought about air racing in those days. It was great.
Well, we all thank you for what you've done for aviation in so many areas, and especially today we focused on the air racing and the people that you knew. So our thanks to you, Clay Lacy.
Thank you.
Steve, is there anything you wanted to say that I didn't?
I'm just tagging two things on, and the first one would be to any of the youngsters out there. Sometimes I think it seems that warbirds are unattainable, and you have to have a special connection. And while I was fortunate with my upbringing, I really wanted to get involved with air racing, and it took a phone call to build a Stephanie in Bakersfield. I was more nervous than I'd ever been in my life at that point, so it took an hour to work up the courage for this phone call. What I was going to say, with the mentality of I was just going to go up there and push a broom to get around the airplane when I was 16, and he was kind enough to give me the opportunity, and that's just going in there with the mindset of being around something, volunteering to help literally at the ground floor, and I was able to work my way up in the air racing community. So if you have a dream, just pursue it to the best of your ability, have an open mind, and anything is achievable. The second thing I'd like to say is, to the veterans that stood up, thank you, but really to the whole crowd as well. It's folks like you that support EAA, support the air races, but really support warbirds and what our mission is. And without you guys showing an interest, we'd get pretty bored talking amongst ourselves. So thank you very much for coming out here today.
Thank you, Steve-O. Justin? Anything?
No, but I'll tag on one quick thing he said about youth and keeping going. When we talked about the racing, he went over all the systems and what we were going to do, and then he stopped and says, well, actually, now I think about it, this is going to be a really highly modified airplane, and it only takes certain people that can fly this thing. There's a lot going on. He had retired from air racing. He says, who's going to fly it? And it was quiet, and I said, well, you are. And he said, well, okay. But my point is, like you were saying to the kids, never stop. There's always something else. Don't give up. Like another opportunity comes by, you just take it, and run with it. And you'll end up a winner, right? So...
Yeah. So, I think you both have done well with the partnership you have. And, yes, Steve, to that, someone may, crack a door for you and you'll have an opportunity, but it's your choice whether you push through and do your part to make it happen. So never, no dream is too big. Warren?
Onward and upward.
Onward and upward, he says. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a hand to this wonderful panel. Beautiful airplanes. Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks for sitting in the sun. This is, and to all of you who set it out here.